Hello, everyone. Professor Philip Travis here. This week, it's week 2, and of course, last week we were examining the emergence of civilization. We were talking about some of the early agricultural settlements like Jericho or Chatal Hayuk and other locations, and we were thinking about the long term development of civilization from the origin of agriculture. In the aftermath, of course, of the last ice age. This week, we're going to examine one of the, if not the first, civilization, large-scale civilization, and this particularly refers to the civilizations of Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, of course, referring to the land between rivers, the two rivers being, of course, the Tigris and Euphrates River, which flow out of Turkey through what is today modern-day Iraq, ultimately down toward the Persian Gulf. And of course, when we talk about the emergence of civilization, the primary places where we see the emergence of the first large-scale civilizations are Mesopotamia, of course, Egypt, in China, the Yellow River, and the Yangtze River, both saw very early civilizations, and of course the Indus River in what is today modern Pakistan and India. Those are kind of really regarded as the first known large-scale civilizations. And we know a great deal about the civilization of ancient Egypt, which we will be looking at next week. And we also know a great deal about the civilization in Mesopotamia, which begins really with the emergence of Sumer. And the images you see here would be associated with the civilization of Sumer, sometimes called Sumeria. The civilization of Sumer, which was located largely in what is today modern-day Iraq, emerged around about 4000 BCE, and it is one of the most remarkable civilizations in human history, incredibly advanced and incredibly important for the development of human civilizations following. One of the reasons we know so much about civilizations like the ancient Sumerians is because the ancient Sumerians were the first civilizations to develop a written script. And this, of course, is cuneiform, which you see here. This is an example of the wedge-shaped style of script associated with cuneiform, and the fact that linguists, archaeologists, historians have ultimately been able to decipher the cuneiform script has allowed us to understand a reasonable amount about that civilization beyond what mere artifacts could convey. A similar case, of course, with ancient Egypt. We know far less, for example, about the Indus River civilization in northern India-Pakistan region, because while they had a written script, and we will be looking at this civilization in upcoming weeks, but while they had a written script, much of the written script has been lost and destroyed. We do not have enough evidence of it to decipher due to the nature of the Indus River, its changing course. So a lot of those artifacts have been ultimately buried underneath sediment underwater over time. The Sumerians, of course, were a highly advanced civilization, and we are going to look at some of the differences in sort of the belief systems of the Egyptians and the Sumerians over these next couple of weeks. While Egyptians built pyramids, and the pyramids were really tombs for their great pharaohs and those surrounding themselves with them, and the Egyptians practiced mummification. And this really was symptomatic of the Egyptian sort of positive view of the afterlife and the belief that humans could gain sort of eternal life. And they had these advanced practices from the cult of Osiris to their mummification practices the Egyptians did to sort of act as a vehicle to humans obtaining that eternal life. By contrast, the Sumerians had a more negative view of afterlife. And these different viewpoints of the Egyptians and the Sumerians is almost inherently linked to a large degree to geographical factors. Egypt was highly protected geographically. The Nile River had cataracts in the south, flood area or rapid areas in the south that made it difficult for people south of the Nile River to attack Egypt. They had the Sahara Desert in the west and the Red Sea and desert in the east. And so Egypt was rather protected geographically. And the Nile River, of course, flooded very, very predictably. By contrast, in Sumeria, the rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, flooded unpredictably, often causing devastation to settlements. The geography was much more open as well. And so in Sumer, the settlements were subject to attacks and raids by people from outside areas. And so in Sumer, you see, in this area, you see a collection of sort of city-states, a collection of cities that are all walled cities. They're all sort of, if you will, part of the same civilization, but each little sort of settlement has walls built around it to protect itself from the raiders. They had a very negative view of the afterlife, and they built ziggurats. This is the ruins of the ziggurat at Urk. They built ziggurats to offer sort of religious ritual to the gods, but they did not believe that eternal life was something that was obtainable by humans. And of course, here you see an artifact. This is in the Louvre in France of Ningirshu, this sculpture portrait of one of the Sumerian upper class elites, royalty. So we're looking at ancient Mesopotamia this week. Mesopotamia is where we not only see perhaps the emergence of the first civilization, it's also where you see perhaps the first empire, the Akkadians, which followed the Sumerians. And the Akkadians established a large sort of empire in a much larger area of Mesopotamia. Sumer was located in a much smaller region of Mesopotamia towards the Persian Gulf in the south, whereas the Akkadians now influenced a much larger region and is generally regarded as the first empire. So we're going to think about that too this week. So we're going to start our extra credit today, and the way the extra credit works is I'm going to give you a factoid. I'm going to tell you the factoid right now, and there will be an extra credit discussion board in modules. And all you have to do before Wednesday at midnight, I want you to do this before Wednesday at midnight because I want to see you watching these announcements early as opposed to later so that we're getting things done in the class as we move forward on a good time frame. So all you have to do is go into the extra credit discussion board and just write in your thoughts on the factoid. You can just reiterate the factoid. If you have other ideas, other thoughts that you want to mention, that's good too. But just go into the discussion board, post your response, and you get 1 to 2 bonus points depending on the length of the factoid announcement for doing this. And so we're going to start that this week. This is your factoid. Connected to what I just talked about, the Sumerians were innovators. They're associated with the innovation of the wheel. They were quite good at geometry and mathematics in the building of structures like ziggurats. And as I mentioned, they formed the first known written script, which we've been able to decipher. And as a result of this, we know that the Sumerians created the first written epic that humans are aware of. And this, of course, was the Epic of Gilgamesh. And in the Epic of Gilgamesh, this epic tale follows really the Sumerian worldview in a lot of ways, if you will. And it sort of engages some of these concepts like the futile attempt for humans to gain eternal life, as is conveyed in the Epic of Gilgamesh, and dealing with these sort of realities that, again, are very different than those of the Egyptians. And so the Epic of Gilgamesh, the first sort of known epic narrative written story, which conveys many of the important ideas about the worldviews of the Sumerians at the time, including what they saw as really the futility of of humans attempting to achieve eternal life, in contrast to the Egyptians. Let's have a great week. I'll see everyone in the discussion forum. Let me know if you have any questions.